Let's talk about X-Factors in NHL 26. EA has released the details on all 28 of the new redone X-Factor abilities that will be in this year's game. So in this video, we are going to break down all of the new abilities. I'll give you my takes and opinions on each one. I do want to mention this is going to be specifically for Hockey Ultimate Team. If you are a World of Chell player, obviously my opinion is not going to carry much weight. I don't really play World of Chell anymore, but I will provide all of the info on how the new abilities will work. So all of this information is available on their website, but the first tab says the top 5 impactful X Factors, which I'm probably going to disagree with. They have it listed as post-to-post, quick release, rocket, second wind, and spark plug. So after we go through the list, I'm gonna guess I probably won't line up with this. But let's start first with the Playmaker X Factors. We have 7 listed here. We've got Ankle Breaker, Elite Edges, Quick Draw, as well as Send It, Tape to Tape, Unstoppable, and Wheels. Let's start first with Ankle Breaker, which in the past has been one of the less useful abilities since the X Factors were introduced in NHL 22. However, Ankle Breaker in NHL 26, it states, create separation using dekes with a temporary boost of speed when using a deke to successfully get around a defender. Successful dekes can trigger larger panic reactions on opposing players. The one thing to note about all of the new X Factor abilities is that they all have an animation tied to them. And in the prior years, the abilities that had specific animations that you would get from using the abilities were usually the most impactful in the game. I do also want to point out that there is 3 tiers of ability: Specialist, All-Star, and Elite. Each one will give a more substantial boost to specific things. So for Ankle Breaker specifically, you're going to get a speed and acceleration boost when you pull off a deke around a defender. You're also going to get a boost to toe drag speed, and then depending on the tier, it will increase those boosts. Now, the really big thing I want to know about Ankle Breaker is, does it work on stride dekes? Stride dekes are extremely impactful in game. One of the best, in my opinion. They help keep your speed while changing direction. If it triggers while using a stride deke, I think it might be one of the better abilities in the game, because if you can catch a defender who is back skating, either by using any of the L1 dekes, so any windmill deke, or a toe drag, which you do get a boost on, if the animation will actually cause your player to kind of stumble while turning around, which is what I read with the panic reaction, that could be pretty impactful, especially if you give it to someone that has a high speed rating, whether it's Connor McDavid or Matthew Barzal. Dylan Larkin comes to mind. Any of those players, Nathan McKinnon, this could be a really good ability. It's all going to depend on what dekes actually make it work, because not all dekes are going to be extremely effective one-on-one. On to Elite Edges, which was the best ability, in my opinion, from start of the game to the end in NHL 25, specifically for Hockey Ultimate Team, because it allows you to keep your speed while going left and right. And early on in the game, when agility ratings are really low, it is a massive bonus to have. So Elite Edges in NHL 26 operates much like it has in years past. Shake off opponents with explosive edge work with increased acceleration and agility while performing tight turns and sharp direction changes. So again, think if you're in the corner and you're waiting for your opponent to put some pressure on you, if he goes left, you can go right with Elite Edges, especially early on in the game. You are going to get a massive boost to skating, and if that player is not defending you well positionally, Elite Edges is just going to cook them. It also works really well on defense. For years, it was widely considered just an offensive ability. Elite Edges works without the puck. So when you have a defender like Cale Makar or Quinn Hughes, especially early on in the game when they have higher speed ratings, they can defend really easily because they can make those quick cuts and make up for a bad read, essentially. So Elite Edges, in my opinion, is going to be one of the best abilities, no matter what. Just the way that it works, it's hard for it to not be. On to one of my favorite abilities, and that's Quick Draw. Quick Draw really became popular and almost a staple on every center if you were going to play any sort of competitive Hockey Ultimate Team, because it gives you such an advantage. Starting the play with possession is massive. So how Quick Draw works in NHL 26, create more opportunities for teammates off the draw with faster face-off draw wins, and allows for skill-based one-timers right off the face-off. Unlocks stronger tie-up wins, which box out opposing players. Again, with all these abilities having an animation tied to them, this one could be pretty insane. Skill-based one-timers took over in NHL 25. It brought back the actual use and ability to score on one-timers, but it also brought the ability to just huck it in from the point with pretty much anyone. That being said, in NHL 26, the fact that you can actually get a skill-based one-timer right off the face-off dot is huge. That goal, that play used to be a staple of mine when I started creating content back in NHL 17. You could win the draw, and if you had an offhand defenseman and you won it cleanly, you used to be able to score a one-timer right off the rip. And now with Quick Draw, you will be allowed to as well, which is just a massive bonus. Quick Draw already is one of the best abilities in my opinion because you are just going to use it so much. If you are someone who is good at face-offs, and if you're not, go check out my face-off video, having Quick Draw essentially means you are going to win any face-off in which you use the exact same face-off stance or one that obviously you have the counter to. It gives you a 66% chance to win a draw no matter what. And now it allows you to actually create a play off of the face-off. So again, this one, in my opinion, is going to be a staple on all of my centermen. I will sacrifice attributes as well as size, whatever, to have my centerman have quick draw of some kind. I think that's going to be just a staple for me personally. I'm very curious to see if you can actually score off the skill base one time from the face-off dot. If NHL 25 is any indication, you will be. On to Send It, which was one of the most useless abilities in Hockey Ultimate Team ever since X-Factors were introduced in NHL 22. Now in NHL 26, Send It springs your teammates by enhancing the pass receiver with a temporary boost of acceleration. It unlocks the ability for these players to perform automatic saucer passes. Now it makes it extremely effective. So because it doesn't really do anything to the player that has the puck, it allows them to auto sauce, which is huge. For anyone that doesn't know what that means, if there is a player in the way, so a stick along the boards, they don't have their body up tight to the boards, and you want to fire it off the boards to your streaking player in the neutral zone. If you have Send It, it will auto sauce. You don't have to hit R1 to actually manually do it. The game will do it for you, which is obviously a massive bonus. But I think the better thing about Send It now is that it impacts the player receiving the puck. Again, this is very arcadey, and you can get into whether you like abilities or not. But if you hit Connor McDavid or Nathan McKinnon, especially in Hockey Ultimate Team at launch of the game, with a defenseman that has Send It, I don't know, unless you have Cale Makar, who on defense your opponent is going to be able to actually get back and stop those players. It's going to create a ton of offense off of the breakout pass, but I'll be interested to see if the acceleration boost is enough. I'm skeptical of this one because a lot of the time it's just better to carry the puck out yourself. Again, I'm talking about Hockey Ultimate Team, but it has my interest because of the auto sauce as well. It doesn't look like this is just when you're breaking the puck out either. If a player has Send It, they're always going to get the automatic saucer pass, which is huge. Now, the other passing ability is Tape to Tape, and they've redone that. Tape to Tape, in my opinion, was not an impactful ability in Hockey Ultimate Team over the past few years. Because in NHL, there's a lot of pass assist, meaning that it will kind of keep you on the rails when you're making a pass to a player. You really didn't need it. Now in NHL 26, it states, feather saucer passes and make snappy passes in and out of vision with increased pass power and accuracy. It also unlocks the ability for these players to perform automatic saucer passes. So much like Send It, any player that has Tape to Tape will perform an automatic saucer pass. That is a massive bonus. Now, the one thing about Tape to Tape is the passes will be faster. That I've noticed when doing testing, but as passer rating increases in Hockey Ultimate Team, and it usually does very quickly, that's negligible because once you get into the 90s, they really can't go any faster. The in and out of vision is important, however, because in NHL 25, when you were in the offensive zone, if you were down below the goal line and trying to make a backhand pass or a pass back to your defender that's in a spot for a one-timer, there was essentially no pass assist, it seems. I don't know about you guys, but I experienced a ton of instances where I would try and fire a pass back to the point, and it would just completely miss everyone and go all the way back in my zone. Now, the way to counter that is with button passing, icon passing, which is what I do in the offensive zone specifically, and it essentially is tape to tape because it really never misses when you use icon passing. So again, I don't think tape to tape is going to be a massively impactful ability compared to some of the other ones, and in all honesty, I'd much rather have Send It because that acceleration boost, if it is impactful, is going to just cause constant breakaways. Next, we've got Unstoppable, which is replacing Unstoppable Force, which was one of the best abilities in the game up until NHL 25, when hitting just seemed to be very odd and anyone could hit anyone. Unstoppable Force didn't seem to have that same impactfulness. So in this year's game, reverse the fortune on opposing players with stronger reverse hits. Fight through push checks with increased strength and balance. So This is essentially like combining Back At Ya and Unstoppable Force. Now, when the gameplay trailer was released, they did note that they were going to nerf reverse checks in NHL 26, which in my opinion was extremely necessary. So having someone with Unstoppable just for the reverse check aspect is going to be useful. The other bonus is that it does look like Unstoppable is now going to actually stop players from being able to cause a stumble animation. So what it does is it gives a massive bonus to push check resisting. So if you were just flicking up in the defensive zone or offensive zone and you were trying to get that shove animation, someone with Unstoppable is not going to get stumbled off the puck. They are going to be able to hold on to it cleanly and honestly probably have a clean lane to the net or breakout if someone is doing the shove animation. You're going to have to get hit cleanly to lose the puck. And I have a feeling that combined with the ability to reverse hit anyone essentially again, Unstoppable is going to go back to one of the better abilities in NHL 26. And then lastly, in the playmaking abilities, we have Wheels, which has been one of, if not the best ability in my opinion, from the launch of X-Factors in NHL 22 all the way up until now. Wheels has essentially just removed the debuff that you get when you are skating with the puck. So how it works is if you have 99 skating, let's say, if your player has 99 speed and you are carrying the puck, you get a 3% debuff to your speed stat. So for someone that has 99 speed, they have the puck, 96, so on and so forth. Wheels eliminates that debuff entirely. So whatever your speed rating is, that is what your player will skate with the puck or without, doesn't matter. It's always been one of the better abilities. Speed kills in this game, it always will. So, Wheels in NHL 26, it says, turn on the jets and blow past opponents after hitting top speed with increased speed and acceleration. If there is an acceleration boost with Wheels as well, it just makes it that much better. There is no way that Wheels is not one of the best abilities in NHL 26. It's just going to remain a staple no matter what. All right, on to the offensive X Factors. We've got Backhand Beauty, Big Rig, Big Tipper, 1T, Rocket, Quick Release, and Pressure. We'll start first with Backhand Beauty. We got a glimpse of this thing in the gameplay trailer, and good lord, it looks to be busted early on. So in the prior years, Backhand Beauty was a nice secondary ability, especially in NHL 22 to 24, because it was so cheap. In 25, when they made all of the abilities the same price, it all but lost its effectiveness because Beauty Backhand was the same cost as Elite Edges and Wheels, and there was just no way for it to have the same impact. So in NHL 26, it says, catch opposing players and goalies off guard with increased backhand power, shot, and accuracy. Additionally, backhand passes are as accurate and powerful as forehand passes. That secondary line is extremely important. Not many people realize that when you are on your backhand, you actually have a debuff to your pass accuracy and power. Because passing is essentially automatic in NHL, we don't think about it. But like I mentioned earlier, those times where you try to send it back to the point or you make a pass on your backhand all the way across the ice and you miss your player, it's because there is a debuff to passing. Backhand Beauty eliminates that, so not only does it have some impact offensively, it also has some impact when cycling the puck or breaking the puck out. Like I mentioned, if you can score from beyond the face-off dot with Backhand Beauty, this could be one of the more busted abilities in the game. Now on to Big Rig. Again, one of the most useless abilities in the prior NHL games since X-Factors were released. They've done a lot to make it useful in NHL 26. So in this game, protect the puck and drive the net with authority with increased strength, agility, and balance. Surprise goalies with enhanced accuracy and power with one-handed shots. Unlocks enhanced puck protect animations with the ability to fight through stick contact even at extreme angles. So a lot to unpack here. Number one, the new one-handed shots. We saw that in the release trailer. It looks like if you have Big Rig, those shots will actually be somewhat useful. Again, we have to wait and see. Play the game for a month to see if those shots have any usefulness. There'll probably be some busted glitch shot with it. But with Big Rig, it looks like it's going to operate sort of like close quarters. So close quarters in prior games would allow you to get full power and accuracy on shots, even if it was a busted rebound or the puck was on edge, which is why close quarters was so good. If you can get full power and accuracy on a one-handed shot, that could be a little scary. Now, on top of that, you are going to get a bonus to balance and strength. But the big thing here is if it's only going to be when you're in the protect puck animation. A lot of the player base doesn't even know how to enter that state. So the introduction of total controls, which is what a lot of players use, it made it really awkward to enter into the puck protect. You essentially have to click in the left stick and then move wherever you're going to protect the puck, where you're holding your opponent off. In prior games before Total Control was in the game, it was very easy, and I think a lot of players utilized it well. The big thing here is that secondary statement. Enhanced puck protect animations with the ability to fight through stick contact, even at extreme angles. If that means you can't get pochecked with it, I mean, that, again, in the right hands could be extremely impactful. I think for the high-end player base, I'm talking like Division 2 and above, players that utilize puck protect, Big Rig could be nasty. I'd probably rather just have Unstoppable, but we need to see what they mean by the stick contact even at extreme angles. Next up, we have Big Tipper. Forever one of my favorite abilities in Hockey Ultimate Team. Really isn't all that impactful, but just stupid fun to actually pull off. Now, the thing about Big Tipper in prior games is it really wasn't necessary. I mean, tip shots will go in if you aim specifically for the player's stick, and Big Tipper, while is nice to have on players, really, it's never usually worth the ability point cost. Now, in NHL 26, it states, create chaos in front of the net by taking away the goalie's eyes and influencing their readiness. Find and redirect the puck easier with increased accuracy on deflections and additional longer-ranged animations. It also unlocks deflections with increased range. Now, I don't know what the increased range means, because normally they really only go for a tip if they're like below the face-off dots, which is where you normally see tip shots go. If you're able to tip a puck from the point and the player is almost right in front of you and they actually give a tip animation, that's kind of interesting. This really looks like it's going to operate almost exactly like it has in the prior years. So while it's fun, not necessary at all, really. It'll be interesting to see if it does pop up and have some usefulness, but for the most part, I've really never seen a big need for it, just more fun than anything. Next up, we've got 1T. Now, before NHL 25, when they introduced skill-based one-timers, 1T was really the only way to actually score a one-timer goal in Hockey Ultimate Team. I think people forget that you legit could not score a one-timer goal in HUT before skill-based one-timers. So, while skill-based one-timers definitely need to be tuned so that it isn't just an automatic goal, especially from the point, they at least allowed one-timers to go in, and it really killed the usefulness of this ability. Now, obviously, skill-based one-timers need to be kind of set up, and the player needs to be activated and ready for it. 1T gave them that boost, but they just didn't need to be in a skill-based one-timer spot. It still, in my opinion, just made it pretty useless. Now in NHL 26, it states, become the ultimate threat with increased one-timer shot power and accuracy. This next line makes it extremely interesting. Allows to be an additional skill-based one-timer target when open, which means that in NHL 25, you could only have one player that would be essentially open or primed for a skill-based one-timer. If you have 1T available to you, you have multiple. And if you're trying to manually defend, it was very easy, in my opinion, to defend the D2D one-timer. It was something that I basically sold out for, and the amount of breakaways I would get off of it was crazy. But that being said, if someone is good at holding onto the puck and you have to sell out for a D2D one-timer, let's say, but you have a player with 1T on the other side that is also greened up and ready with that indicator below you, that makes it far more interesting. I'm very curious to try this ability out and how impactful it's going to be. Next up, we have Pressure. This is a new ability in NHL 26. It says build up momentum with shots that generate bonus pressure on every save. So think of it a lot like NHL 24 when they introduced the full pressure system and the goalie fatigue system. Early on when they released those new systems into the game, it was so busted. You could essentially get across the line, flick a shot on, and you almost had full pressure. It was busted. And over the last year or so, they've really nerfed the full pressure system. Like, you really have to be firing pucks on, getting a puck back on the forecheck to get it activated. In all honesty, I think I went from seeing it multiple times a game to like once every other game. So having the pressure X factor on a player, if you were to, again, get across the line and just fire a puck on, if that's going to give you like half of the full pressure meter, that makes it interesting. I think a lot of these abilities, I'm talking again specifically for HUT, if we are allowed to have multiple abilities on a player, which in my opinion, I hope we don't, having multiple of these insane abilities is really going to create an just almost too far gone arcade gameplay, which we kind of already have, but it's going to be even more insane. But for example, if a player has 1T or some of the other abilities we're about to get into, as well as the pressure X factor, like, in my opinion, if a defender has pressure and you're just ripping one-timers and you're getting the rebound every time because that's really what happens, that's going to be insane. So again, I'm curious to see how impactful this will be. I think it's going to be an absolutely nuts secondary ability if we're getting multiple abilities on players. Again, I hope we don't in HUT, but knowing them, we're probably going to end up with like 6 on one card. All right, these next two, in my opinion, have the chance to be really game-breaking. These are, my opinion, going to dictate a lot of the meta in Hockey Ultimate Team specifically, and anytime you get cards with these abilities, they're going to be like the must-haves. Again, this is just my guess, but quick release states, get shot off lightning quick with an extra fast shot release. Decrease goalie readiness on both snapshots and wrist shots. Why this is important is because this essentially replaces Make It Snappy and Snipe. Both of those abilities have had their high points in NHL. In NHL 24, Make It Snappy, you could just flick up and it almost went in every time. Snipe really wasn't necessary, and because you actually have to set up for a wrist shot, it really wasn't an impactful ability. In NHL 25, the far side wrist shot was so good, Snipe ended up being one of my favorite offensive abilities. I think Make It Snappy had less usefulness because those flick up shots didn't go in as much. But now you essentially have an ability that's going to replace Snipe and Make It Snappy. So anytime that you shoot anything that isn't a slap shot, which is common, you're going to have a really high chance to score. So quick release early on, I'm pretty scared for when it comes to HUT. And then we've got Rocket. Now, Rocket is essentially replacing Thunderclap, which was not all that useful in NHL, in my opinion, because we have green one-timers, okay? They did not stack. But in NHL 26, Rocket will have slap shots create large rebounds and can cause the goalie to react when hit up high with increases to slap shot accuracy and power. So it's that second part that, in my opinion, has a chance to be pretty game-breaking. Essentially, if you take a slap shot up high, it's going to almost give you a stun lock where the goaltender has this, like, freeze animation where he's been blasted by some crazy hard puck, which means that if you don't get the rebound, he's stuck in this animation, and you're going to be able to score off the rebound pretty easily. Now, again, slap shots weren't all that impactful in NHL 25, and I want to be clear, I'm not talking about green up skill-based one-timers. I'm talking about just hauling off a slap shot like the good old days. I don't know how impactful those will be, because in NHL 25, they've really stopped a lot of them as long as the goalie could see them. But if they're going to get a crazy animation when you take a slap shot and it hits the goalie up high, that could be pretty devastating to the gameplay, I'll be honest. So I'm very curious to see how this one plays out. Next up, we've got defensive X Factors with 9 new abilities. We've got Born Leader, Hipster, No Contest, Quick Pick, Second Wind, Spark Plug, Stick 'em Up, Truculence, and Warrior. Let's start with Born Leader. Now, Born Leader in NHL 25 was really impactful, especially because of the big nerf to endurance and all of the line change issues that we had all year. Now, in NHL 26, it says, rally the team with every action by increasing team energy after every shot block, body check, or shot on net. Now, again, if you get an entire line of Born Leader, you can essentially just keep them out there for extended periods of time because it's every shot block and body check as well as just shooting on net. Again, I think Born Leader, especially early on, is pretty impactful because when you're starting in HUT, you really only have like 1 or 2 lines that are really good. If you have a couple players that have Born Leader, you're able to keep them on the ice longer. Energy is probably still going to be a massive issue in NHL 26. So Born Leader, in my opinion, was like an A-tier ability, just missing out from the upper echelon. And I don't see how it's going to really fall any further than that because of how impactful it was with the energy gains. Next, we've got Hipster, which states, lay devastating hip checks on players with improved hit power that punish opposing players with increased stamina loss and a slowing, lingering effect after a big hit. Perfectly lined up hit checks will cause the opposing player to lose their stick. Again, we are getting into just the most insane arcadey gameplay, and gameplay is always going to be subjective. It's simply not for me. I get that it's grandiose, but as I get older, I've realized that I just want something that mimics the real-life game more than anything else. So the fact that you're going to get a hip check and the player just automatically tosses their stick, that one's just super gimmicky to me. Now, the big thing with Hipster is if it's going to work like hip checks have in the past couple years. So again, when total control came into the game, players will just throw their ass end at you on the forecheck. It looks so dumb. But if you were to even nick someone in a hip check state, they basically stumble and lose the puck. It looked like in the gameplay trailer blog that they are nerfing hip checks again. So the speed at which you can turn around and actually do that on the forecheck is getting nerfed yet again. However, I'm hoping that Hipster doesn't allow players to just utilize that again. You really saw this at the high end of gameplay. Hip checks in general, you really don't see them all that much. This is going to be one of the most useless abilities in my opinion, unless it allows them to use hip checks like they have over the past few years, and it just completely avoids the nerf that we're getting in NHL 26. Again, hip checks are just hard to actually line up and do correctly. You rarely see them. All right, next we've got No Contest, which was really more of a World of Chell ability. It really didn't have a place in Hockey Ultimate Team all that much. But in NHL 26, it states overpowering opposing players with additional stick and arm strength and come out with the puck with increased speed and acceleration. So again, this is going to be interesting. This ability would work when you do a stick check tie up in the slot. Like if you're manually tying someone up, someone with No Contest would just kind of shove them and ignore them. The increased speed and acceleration boost. Again, if you go into the corner and it's just, puck's bouncing around, you do a stick lift and then you get the puck back, does that trigger the speed boost and acceleration? Because if so, if you're forechecking with No Contest and you're in the corner and you win the puck and then you get a boost out of the corner right towards the net, that could be extremely impactful. Again, we're going to have to wait and see just how this one and other abilities like this work when we get in game. I don't think it'll have a big place in Hockey Ultimate Team unless that speed and acceleration is triggered very easily. Again, it's all going to depend on when those things get triggered. Next up, we've got Quick Pick, which in my opinion was one of the better defensive abilities in the game. It essentially allowed you to get an animation when trying to intercept passes. Like in NHL 24, people forget about the gameplay of NHL 24. Even more than what we had this year, you could fire a pass through 5 different players and it would just go through. It was absurd. The cross crease was so much more rampant in 24. I think a lot of people forget that. In 25, it was as well, but there was ways to actually get an intercept, and intercepts elsewhere other than right in front of the net were very good. Like, again, D to Ds, I could pick them off so easily. Quick Pick in NHL 26, it states effortlessly block passing lanes using stick or the body to get a piece or intercept the puck clean with additional range and increased puck handling. It unlocks the enhanced pickup and interception range with additional skate and stick defensive deflections and interceptions. Again, we're going to have to see just how crazy the animations are. For example, if you just try to saucer a pass off the boards, will someone with Quick Pick just go down and block it and make sure that doesn't get through? Quick Pick has the chance to be one of the best defensive abilities in the game. For example, if you have a defenseman with Quick Pick and you're trying to block the ever-popular cross-ice pass right through the crease, if Quick Pick actually gives you an animation where they close off their skates, they go down and stop it, like, that will be huge. Quick Pick was a good ability in NHL 25. It wasn't an absolute must-have, but if we're getting some crazy animations and we're actually intercepting saucer passes or passes that are some of the more common dangerous ones, like the cross crease, then this could be an S-tier ability. Next up, we've got a new one of my favorites that I can't wait to try out, Second Wind. So in NHL 26, it states, outlast the opposing team by instantly recovering energy when you become exhausted. Must be recovered back to full to trigger again. This has the chance to be awesome. So how it's going to work is your player comes out for the start of a shift. Obviously, the energy drain in NHL 25, if it's any indication of how it's going to work in 26, your players get winded very quickly. It was one of the biggest things and takeaways from this year's game was that your players just ran out of energy so fast. Second Wind, when your player runs out of energy completely. In NHL 25, they were useless. You had to get rid of the puck and go off for a change, and half the time they didn't change. What happens in NHL 26 with Second Wind, when they lose their entire stamina bar, goes all the way back up, and that player can stay on the ice. Massive advantage. Think about when you've got a situation where you and your opponent have both been on the ice for a while, and let's say you've been hemmed in your own zone the whole time. Your opponent still loses energy when they're cycling the puck and things like that, and they've been out there for a while. You get the puck back with someone like Quinn Hughes or Cale Makar or anyone that has a decent speed rating. You get the puck back, they go for a line change, and they can just beeline to bust down through that line change. It has the chance to be massively impactful. Now, the other one is that it must be recovered back to full to trigger again. That's interesting because it states that you instantly recover all of your energy. I'm assuming that these tiers are going to determine how much energy is regained. Because it looks like, for example, Specialist, you're going to get about 40% of your energy back. All-Star is around 50, and then Elite is about 80%. So I'm assuming that what it means by back to full, you're never going to get all the way full, so you're going to have to go for a line change to get it to activate again. Again, I think this one has a lot of promise. All right, on to Spark Plug, a new ability in NHL 26. It says, get your team going with body checks that generate additional pressure while also giving a temporary speed and acceleration boost after delivering a hit. Again, very interesting. So when you hit someone with someone that has Spark Plug, your team will get an speed and acceleration boost, as well as agility, meaning that you get a check in the offensive zone on the forecheck. With someone with Spark Plug, your other players around are way faster, which is just going to cause absolute chaos. You also get more pressure towards the full pressure system when you're doing stuff with a player with Spark Plug. Again, my hope is that they give Spark Plug to like those energy guys on like the third and fourth lines, because then you could have players lower in your lineup that would be really impactful because they can help elevate your other players that are on those lines, because if they're getting a boost every time you hit with that player, just causes a lot of interesting things. Now, my guess, in all honesty, unless the additional pressure that you get when you're using someone with Spark Plug is massive, I actually don't think this is going to be a huge one. I think it's going to be very situational. And the problem with situational X-Factor abilities is that they just can't keep up with other abilities that are always on. Elite Edges, Wheels, even Quick Release or Rocket, because those are on any shot. Those are just more common things that you can trigger. Now we've got Stick 'em Up, which was one of the best abilities when X-Factors were introduced. Lost a lot of its usefulness over the last couple of years. So how Stick 'em Up works is disrupt and separate players from the puck with improved poke-check accuracy, recovery, and defensive skill stick speed. Now, the reason why I think Stick 'em Up lost a lot of its value was simply because the actual stick checking stat gets raised up way too fast. Once you get to like 99 stick checking, Stick 'em Up isn't nearly as important. And it's an ability that just gets raised very quickly or even starts out kind of high. So every time you hit R1, your poke-check attribute, right, determines how fast, how accurate, and how quickly you'll recover when using it to do it again. Stick 'em Up allows you to basically just get a massive boost when doing that. Now, the problem with Stick 'em Up was that even if you got a successful poke-check, in the last two games, your player would just knock the puck free, and then your opponent would just be able to get it back right away, which obviously made it lose a lot of its usefulness. If it actually jars the puck loose quite far, and that will make it quite useful again. On to Truculence, the best defensive ability, in my opinion, since the launch of NHL X-Factor abilities in 22. This one I fear in NHL 26 because they made it even better. So how Truculence will work, it says distribute punishing shoulder checks on players with improved hit power that leave opposing players with increased stamina loss and a slowing effect after a big hit. Perfectly lined up shoulder checks will cause the opposing player to lose their stick. So now not only are you going to be able to trigger a stumble animation when you're just performing any hits, they also lose a ton of stamina, which is a massive issue in 25 because they don't have a lot of energy, and they are actually slowed. Like the player actually gets a speed debuff when you hit someone with Truculence, meaning that if you've got a guy going down the boards and he's trying to get by you, if you have Truculence and you actually just hit them slightly, now they're slower and the rest of your team can get back. The biggest problem here is that big shoulder checks will cause the opposing player to lose their stick. Again, this is just kind of an absurd arcadey ability, and I hope that this does not trigger on just normal checks. Like, I hope it's the 5 steps into somebody, head down, neutral zone, that kind of thing, because if it's just on pretty regular checks, this could be extremely frustrating for the player base and super overpowered. I really hope that they are light on the Truculence players early on in 26 because, again, the only way to fully test out these abilities is to just release them in the wild for all of the player base. If they don't do adjustments, I have a feeling Truculence is just going to dominate 26. And then lastly, for defensive abilities, we've got Warrior. This is a new one. Fight through the pain with reduced stamina penalties when body checked or while blocking shots, and shrug off lingering slow effects from big hitters. Unlocks enhanced shot blocking animations, resistance to dropping their stick, and makes the player immune to minor injuries. This is essentially the one-to-one counter of Truculence. It takes away the stamina penalty you get when you're hit. It also negates the slow effect you get when getting hit from players that have Truculence, it looks like. And it doesn't look like you're actually going to lose your stick if you get hit with someone that has Hipster or Truculence. So I do like this ability because this essentially replaces like Ice Pack and things like that. Injuries just aren't common in NHL HUT, so it was pretty useless. However, if Truculence is just rampant, I hope that they release the same amount of players with Warrior because it looks like it's the true counter to it, which does make for some interesting combinations and team builds. And then lastly, we've got goalie X Factors, which really haven't mattered since post-to-post in NHL 22. But I am pretty interested with some of these because they have the chance to actually be impactful because of the animations that they get. So we'll start with Dialed In. Keep on a roll with increased save accuracy and reaction time for each save made in a row. Bonus resets after letting in a goal. Again, I believe the original Dialed In was like they had to hit 15 shots and then the remainder of the game they just had it activated. In the lower divisions, I'm talking like 3 and below, maybe even 4 and below, Dialed In could be huge because a lot of the player base is just not really going for those like go-to goals. They're just firing the puck on the net. And Dialed In could be impactful in that aspect. I still would take any defensive or forward ability outside of maybe Hipster over any of the goalie ones, or at least Dialed In. But this could be interesting, again, for those players that play in the divisions where you're just flicking stuff on net. In the higher divisions, this won't have any impactfulness at all because it's not common to see less than 15 shots in a game with some of the better players because they're really just taking shots that they know have a really high chance to go in. Next up, we've got Post to Post, which again was one of the more popular ones earlier on. Stretch post to post to make miraculous cross-crease saves with increased speed and improved save accuracy when sliding. Unlocks additional windmill reactions on one-timer saves and eliminates reaction penalties on perfect one-timers. This is what I was talking about when there might be some useful goalie abilities. In NHL 25, if you slowed down and actually looked at what happened on skill-based one-timers, was it didn't actually jack up the shot itself. What it did was they hammered the goalie with this almost like T-Rex arm like animation where they're just like throwing their arm up. And that allowed all of those goals to go in, especially unscreened, which is just a massive issue. If post-to-post is going to remove that reaction animation, I would almost say that this is necessary to have on your team. Now, again, if you find skill-based one-timers are still going in regularly and it's unscreened early on, then post-to-post goes back to being just a useless goalie ability, much like all the other goalie abilities. But that one animation that it's stating should fix makes it almost a must-have because DDD one-timers are 80% of the shots that you see. Recharge, which looks like it's replacing Energizer. It states fight through pressure by reducing the pressure meter gain and fatigue loss on opposing shots and by increasing energy when the puck leaves the offensive zone. Again, helpful. I would rather have offensive or defensive abilities. And if I'm being honest, again, if post-to-post actually does what it's stating here, I don't think that there's an argument to be had for any of these other abilities because recharge is helpful when you're not playing well, right? Like if you are playing well, you shouldn't see the full pressure meter activated all that much. So it's an ability that's only going to help when you're getting crushed. And maybe that's enough, but I don't want an ability that's only going to be useful when I'm losing or getting hemmed in. I would rather an ability that helps when I'm trying to score, essentially. Next up is Showstopper. Utilize cat-like reflexes with increased save accuracy and readiness when performing reflex saves and consecutive saves. Increased ability to see through screens and react to deflections. Again, nice thing to have on your goaltender. Not nearly as impactful as post-to-post. And honestly, I'd probably rather have the recharge one as well. Deflections are a useful way to score, but you really don't see someone just only going for those. So you're only seeing maybe a couple a game and maybe none, which kind of removes the usefulness of Showstopper. And then lastly, Sponge, another interesting one in NHL 26. So it absorbs shots and limit rebound opportunities with an increased ability to acquire the puck on saves and jump on pucks quicker with faster cover speeds. This is huge. Unlocks additional windmill reactions and eliminates goalie reactions when hit from shots up high. If Rocket becomes rampant in NHL 26 early on, having a goalie with Sponge is going to be not necessary, but very helpful. Again, if this getting shot up high by someone with Rocket actually stun locks your goalie every time, it's going to be a disaster. And the only way that you're going to be able to counter that is if you get a goalie with Sponge. So while I like that a lot of these abilities clearly have counters to them, a lot of these abilities are just so arcadey and makes it pretty tough on players that just like realistic gameplay. But again, gameplay is never going to be universally loved. It is subjective. What I enjoy isn't going to be what you guys enjoy. So again, I'm just giving my own opinion. All right, so let's go back to the top 5 most impactful X factors. And I'll be honest, I think a few of these are correct. I think post-to-post, again, if it works the way that it's intended, going to be almost necessary. Quick Release and Rocket are devastating abilities. Again, I don't think slap shots are the end-all be-all. Again, I think they're actually quite useless outside of the skill-based one-timers, at least in past games. But if it's going to stun the goalie, massively useful. Quick Release allows you to get a bonus on any shot that isn't a slap shot. So a lot of players don't even know how to take wrist shots, and they think they are, but they're taking snapshots. So now it just works on anything. Huge. Second Wind is another one. I think that is going to be really, really impactful. Being stuck out there, your opponent also needs to line change. You getting all the way back up to like over half your energy, you're able to just fly down, and this could cause breakaways pretty consistently, or at least save you. Like if you're hemming your opponent in, they get out on a breakout, you've been out there for a while and your defenseman has it, and he just gets his energy back, he can keep up and at least stave off that, rush chance. Sparkplug, like I mentioned, I think it's not going to be as impactful as people think. I'm going to be excited to come back to this video after a month of launch because it could. I just think that it's not going to be as impactful as everyone thinks. Truculence, however, has the chance to break the game if there is enough players that get Truculence. So Truculence is going to be in the top 5 for me as well. Also, not having wheels or elite edges in here is pretty crazy, but I think my stance on X Factors is this. They desperately needed to redo the X Factor list that came out in NHL 22 because there are so many that are just useless, completely useless, like All Alone, for example, or even Send It. So I like the fact that they've actually gone in and made almost every ability really impactful. However, I don't love that they are becoming so impactful that they are more important than essentially the player's attributes or even size. We're getting to the point now where with all of these abilities, if they work as intended, it's going to be a very arcadey gameplay experience, especially if players and HUT cards get multiple of these abilities throughout the year. Honestly, I would love it if players just got one ability, because once you get into like the elite tier on multiple abilities, it's going to be nuts. And when you look at the Versus roster and they showed off McDavid, he's got multiple elite abilities. So I'm going to assume that we're going to get cards that have multiple and maybe early on. The one thing I will say about X Factors from a HUT perspective is that without them, HUT is extremely bland from a player feel standpoint. Guys, I've been reviewing cards and testing cards for the last 7 years. Outside of size, speed, and weight, there really is no differentiator. You're playing with essentially just the same player type on every single card. There is nothing to make them feel special. They do not have custom strides. They do not have custom shots. So for the most part, Austin Matthews played exactly the same as Leon Draisaitl or even a like-minded rated Nico Hischier. Major issue in the game, and I'm hoping with Ice Cube 2.0, I don't think it'll have an impact this year, but if we can get to a point where players have actual tendencies as well as shot styles and skating strides that they do in real life to make them feel different, I hope they get rid of X Factor abilities once we get to that point. Because X Factor abilities actually make cards and different players feel different. There's no way around that. I just think that they might be too powerful now. But again, we have to wait and see. We can't make judgments on stuff we haven't tried out yet. The last thing I'll say is that it appears that we are just getting fewer and fewer patches each year. How the game comes out at launch, for the most part, is really what we get all year. And when you change the X Factor abilities, and there isn't a massive testing to them, in which we're testing out the abilities to see how they play and we're making adjustments to it before the game is launched, we're going to end up in a situation where there's a few abilities that are just so broken. And as God is my witness, I will not be giving any opinion or feedback on how those abilities should be treated, whether they're buffed, nerfed, or whatever. Learned my lesson on that one. Whether I think the game needs to be balanced, that will not come from me. Again, the game is subjective, and when you have a game like Hockey Ultimate Team where people are spending real money and real time, you cannot change something as dramatic as how abilities work when they've invested time and money to make a team based on how you launch the game. It is a very delicate balance, something that I learned in NHL 22, and I completely understand now. So there is a lot of positives in terms of just the abilities as a whole being useful. Also a lot of negatives, like your goalie getting stunned on a slap shot. We're going to have to wait and see. One thing I do know, the game is going to be different. It'll probably end up with the same complaints, but at least it'll be different, and that's interesting early on. Thank you guys again for watching. Make sure you subscribe as we ramp up content for the launch of NHL 26. I've got a lot of stuff planned, so make sure you stay tuned. Have a good one, guys.